just to kind of start off with, would you mind just introducing yourselves and also saying what your role is at Nottingham Stand Up to Racism?
Okay, I'm Richard Buckwell. I'm Joint Secretary with Tulani Molieff of the group, and I became a secretary probably about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, and I'm Cheryl Rounceville. I've been an active member of the group for about 3 years now. I don't have a titled role or anything, but just a member that's quite active in the group.
Yeah. And in terms of, the recent UK riots, what were sort of both of your original reactions to everything that was going on?
Well, we got suspicions things would be happening by the far right in Britain following big demonstration, the far right, around a guy called Tommy Robinson organised in London on the 27th of July, and it was a lot bigger than far right protests had been for some time. So the word was out, things might well happen. And then out of the blue, there were these very sad murders in Southport. And within a couple of days, things blew up. I was away in Germany at the time, so perhaps it's down to Cheryl.
Yeah. Well, I think, as Richard said, when that protest happened on the 27th in London, I think everybody was not surprised by the number of far-right followers that went there, but it was scary as well. But I think we'd seen a little bit of that coming with Reform getting, I think, a couple of MPs and things like that. So, and all these years of austerity and people sort of kind of tending to the far right. So it's been a while coming. But that big demonstration really, and the murder of those poor girls really kicked things off this summer. So what we did, I think, with Stand Up to Racism, we had a meeting and said, we have to counter the far right protests. We have to have counter protests. And so we did in different cities around the UK. So for Nottingham, we had one, I think it was the 10th of August in Market Square. Quite a few hundred from our side, counter protesters, but also big number on the other side. And the police had to get involved. And luckily there wasn't any real violence like there had been in other cities, but it was still worrying to see the number of the far right people that came out to that. But then the following week, we'd heard that they were going to go to Ruddington and harass a lady whose son or relative was an immigration lawyer, but he had registered his business to her house, and they were going to go and harass whoever was living in that house. So we, working with our group, Stand Up to Racism, working with the trades councils and other community groups, quickly called all of our members to come down there and help fight them off or demonstrate against them. We really don't want to physically fight, but so we went, and there were, again, several hundred of us and 5 of them. So it was a pretty easy contest at that time. And I think we got the message across to them that there are more of us that are anti-racist than are far-right, fascist racists kind of thing. And then the following Saturday, we had another demonstration in Market Square. And again, several hundred anti-racists showed up, no one from the far right. So we felt there was some victory there, and that we showed them again how many people are anti-racist in Nottingham. There aren't many of them, but there are a lot of us.
Mm-hmm. And, going back to the original kind of protest and then counter protest as well, was there any, was it difficult to set it all up given how sudden it all was? All these sudden protests and counter protests going on. Was there some sort of difficulty, or is it something that the organization's used to?
Well, I don't think we've seen anything like this for some years in Britain. And as Cheryl said, the undercurrent to all this is the austerity that's going on, and people don't see an alternative. And unfortunately, I think the general election showed a lot of people actually looking to reform and blaming it on immigrants. And so that undercurrent was there. And I suppose I've been around quite a bit. It's a long time since I've seen turnouts like this by the far right. And I think one thing that I'd like to say early on is that it was just so important, the numbers that did turn out. In the actual fact, although I was seeing it from afar, I know that there were about twice or three times the number of anti-racists to racists that turned out. I mean, there were quite a lot of them, perhaps 100 or more, which is pretty frightening. We're not used to that in Nottingham. But that is what made the big difference. And Cheryl talked about the Wednesday, and all around the country, huge numbers of people turned out to say, we welcome refugees here, they shouldn't be blamed, and similar things. And that is actually what turned things nationally. There's a lot of talk about the heavy sentences, which did follow on, but I think what turned things around was what happened on that Wednesday, when so many people came out across the country, from cities which are Nottingham quite big, but to smaller places as well, made a huge difference. In one or two places, I know there's an area in London called Walthamstow, where something like 10, 15,000 people turned out, absolutely huge. And they really represented the majority of what people thought. That's what made the difference to pushing down the far right, not the big sentences which have been following on some weeks late. I think it's absolutely decisive, the numbers that came out.
But I don't think we didn't really have trouble getting people out, to be honest. I think the good people of Nottingham that are anti-racist were looking for, how can I help? Where can I go? How can I demonstrate? So it was quite easy to get that many people out for those counter protests.
Mm-hmm. And I know you said you were in Germany at the time. Was it for both of or all of the counter protests, or just the first few ones?
No, I missed them all. There's a good thing about that, and the bad thing, I'd have liked to be, on the winning side. But I could see them happening for Germany. It was mentioned on the news abroad as well. Mm-hmm. Not a big thing, but we've seen what's happened in countries in Europe where the far right have got quite powerful, and to see that this might be happening in Britain, I was really worried, and I was using social media to find out what was happening here.
Yeah. What about you? Did you manage to go to any of the counter protests?
I went to two of them. The one Saturday, I was in urgent care because I fell and hurt my arm, unfortunately. But the other two I went to, and it was great atmosphere. And as I said, hundreds of anti-racists came out and really, I don't know how to even describe it. It was just such a great feeling to know there's so many people in Nottingham that are against racism. So that's, now to just get them out to regular meetings and stuff like that would be wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and also from that, I remember, I think there was a quote from one of the, chief constables from the Nottinghamshire Police, where he mentioned there was no need to come out for the protest involving the House of the Elderly Woman, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. What is kind of your reaction to that comment from the constable of him saying that there was no need for counter-protesters to come out?
Well, I think it was absolutely crucial that people showed where they stood, because I think one of the things we've seen lately, a feeling people can't do anything and it doesn't matter what I say. And for once, it did show that it did matter what you said. And as I said earlier, I think that was the crucial thing in turning it around. If people hadn't turned out, the far right would have felt very confident.
Yeah, I think they would have taken that as, permission to do more and to riot more and attack migrants and immigrants and refugees and asylum seekers. So it was crucial that people came out. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I kind of felt the police were saying to the far right not to come out, to be honest, rather than the counter protesters, but I could be wrong.
Maybe it was me who misread it, but maybe they meant both. I don't quite recall. But yeah, kind of moving on from that as well, how would you say the police kind of handled it? I mean, the actual officers over there in person, a lot of the time just separating the two groups.
Yeah, I think they had a lot to deal with. As I said, the things didn't get out of hand in Nottingham. There wasn't a lot of violence. And that first Saturday, I think there was some bottle throwing and some people calling each other nasty names across the divide. But there wasn't anything like we'd seen in other cities with fires being set and stores being looted. So I would say that, the Nottingham police did a pretty good job. Yeah.
And how would you say as well was reaction from the local council and the local councillors?
I suppose we're looking at each other and thinking, well, what did they say?
Where were they?
Certainly individually, there were, I think, councillors on the demonstrations. The council did convene a meeting afterwards, I think, with the police and other, and asked various groups to come along. And certainly our chair, Leroy, went along to it, but I really don't know what's become of it.
Yeah. And I think on the one Saturday, Nadia Whittam, who's the MP, one of our MPs in Nottingham, she couldn't make it, but she sent some words of support and things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think of essentially, how do you think the far right and these races that have shown up are going to move forward? Do you believe there's going to be any more protests or riots from them soon? Or do you think that, seeing this turnout from the people of Nottingham and also the people throughout the country, that this is something that's not going to happen again, at least soon?
Well, I think because the circumstances of people in poverty and austerity actually hasn't changed, and Starmer said things are going to get worse before they get better. I think the conditions are still there. They think this won't happen again because people are given really stiff sentences. But Tommy Robinson, who is the leadership of the far right, has now announced he's having a massive demonstration on the 26th of October in London. And clearly, they're not going away. They're still saying the same things. Immigrants are to blame for you not having housing, not having your health service. Well, on the health service, in fact, if it wasn't for migrants, we wouldn't have a health service. They staff huge parts of it. So I don't think it is going away. And actual fact, not around here where we've had successful turnouts, but there are still towns where they are still having protests. Places like Aldershot, which is very much a military town in Hampshire, Bournemouth, some places which you would think are in the rich southeast. They are still, where they feel they can get away with the protests, are still doing it at this moment. It might not be reported, but the danger is still there. And also Farage from Reform, who I think has got a lot to answer for in the way that he said the police weren't telling all the truth about what happened in Southport, which clearly they tried to play it quite sensitive and didn't lie about anything that was said as far as I can see. They're still trying to muddy the waters. Reform have a conference in Birmingham on the weekend of the 20th, 22nd of September, very soon, and to Racism will be organising a protest there, and there will be people going across from all around the Midlands to make sure they don't get a lot of airtime, because, you know, if they're on the air saying these same things again, that's a recipe for more people feeling disenfranchised and turning out and having a go at migrants who aren't to blame for the situation we face ourselves with.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree with everything he just said. And I do think he said it very diplomatically about Farage. Farage lied. He touted conspiracy theories that just added fuel to the fire for these riots. So I love that I've seen people calling them the Farage riots to really call him out for that. So yeah, he's despicable. And, you know, I think we're just gonna, you know, now that they have some legitimacy because they have some MPs, we're probably just gonna hear more of that kind of BS. And that, again, just fuels that far right sense of we can do whatever we want kind of thing. We can terrorize immigrants. We can terrorize asylum seekers. So we have to fight back. And hopefully we'll have a big presence in London on that, the 26th of October against them. I mean, if the number of people that came out in Walthamstow is any indication, hopefully we'll have 10,000 or more people there against the far right.
Mm-hmm. And since you've, you know, kind of brought up Farage and reform, what do you think about kind of like the media reporting a lot on reform and Farage with, you know, now I believe 4 seats, but not that same kind of reporting happening with something like the Green Party, which has the same amount, if I'm not mistaken. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's always been the case. A number of times Farage is on Question Time, and this was before he got elected. You know, they have no MPs, and yet he's probably one of the most consistent people on the Question Time panel on the BBC. He gets so much airtime, and yet, you know, in terms of the largest political parties in this country, you know, elected representatives, it's not them. You know, there seems to be this assumption, he continually spouts, this is what the British people think. It's just not true. You know, given half a chance, if we can get something in the media. You saw what happened when the demonstrations were, you know, who came out and said what they really thought. It was clearly people who are anti-racist. And yet we get so little airtime to put the other side of the story. I'm involved with something called Care for Calais, which is about supporting asylum seekers who come over here. And the arguments about how do you stop the small boats, the argument that, well, if there was a safe way of getting here, you wouldn't need the small boats. You completely get rid of the people smugglers making all that money, put them out of business immediately. Asylum seekers wouldn't have to be put up in hotels because they would be assessed before they arrived here and able to work and so on, which at the moment they're not until they've had that assessment done. You know, economically, it saves the country a lot of money. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, I forgot what the question was.
Yes, I think I might have gone off message at the end.
I was listening. Yeah, to hear.
The question was just, you know, if you have any opinion on it, what you think about Farage with Reform 4 seats getting a lot more media coverage than the Green Party, for example, with the same amount.
Yeah, I think Richard is right. He's good at getting himself out there, isn't he? And he says things, I think, that kind of good sound bites for the media to kind of latch on to. But it is up to the media to bring in opposing voices, and they don't always do that. It reminds me of, in my home country, all we hear about all the time is Trump, and you don't hear much about his opponents, you know, but it's always about what he says and all of that. So it's definitely an unequal kind of display of opinions, definitely. But yeah, I can't believe Question Time would have him on. But anyway.
Yeah, and since you've also brought up the refugees and the asylum seekers, and just immigrants in general, what do you think these protests and consequently the counter protests are going to? How do you think they're going to affect the immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees coming here?
Well, I think you can see the numbers are still coming here because they're only coming here. They don't necessarily want to leave they don't want to leave their home countries, but the situation's so bad that unless things improve there, they will start keep coming. I mean, they're fleeing wars. We've just seen what's a whole lot of publicity about what the situation is in Afghanistan. I'm not surprised people keep coming. And I think it's disgraceful that the German government actually sent a load of quite legitimate asylum seekers back to Afghanistan, which is absolutely horrific, seeing what they might be met with. So on the one hand, they're desperate and they will come here and they've got a lot of skills to offer, I might add. That's one thing. But I think the other thing concerned with what happened a few weeks ago, a lot have been very terrified. I mean, I know a couple of people personally who've been really worried about going out. I have a friend who's it's not just asylum seekers, it's migrants who are here quite legitimately, people who probably even got British citizenship, who are, because they're not white, easy targets. Certainly in the riot in Hull, I think a group of Romanians was pulled out of their car and attacked simply because they didn't look white British. And, how do you tell who is British and who is not? And it becomes just a question of skin colour or looking different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really true because I'm an immigrant and I'm never called out for being an immigrant, but that's because I'm white probably. So yeah, I think it's a really bad time for refugees and asylum seekers. It really is, and people of color in general. And with the far right rising, I'm really worried. Really worried about what's going to happen. And I one of the reasons I got involved in Stand Up to Racism was because I'm anti-racist, but also I work with international students and I love working with them. Great kids to work with. And also I have my nieces were adopted from China. And so what I want to do is try to work towards a world that they don't have to put up with racism anymore. So, but yeah, we have a long way to go still, unfortunately. As these riots showed, I think there's a lot of people that are they just don't understand that, some of these far-right parties are just using migrants and refugees and asylum seekers to divide people. They're blaming them for things when it's not, the blame shouldn't be on them. The blame should be on the government for, all the austerity and not taxing rich people more.
Yeah, and sort of off of that, and also because you've both mentioned the sentences the government's been giving out before, what do you think has been the general government response, not local government? What do you think do you think that the sentences are going to have any effect at all?
Actually, my worry is, look at the state of the prisons at the moment, is those people who have been sentenced, well, I don't think it's going to change their minds at all. They're going to come out more embittered. That's what frightens me. Unless you change the conditions of austerity, giving them a sentence, well, they've done some really horrible things and they deserve to be punished, but they're not going to come out with changed minds. Just one thing I'd like to add, I just thought of this, because we all learn things which are new to us. Someone said the other day, do you know who the worst overstayers are of migrants in this country? People who've got visas to come here for certain amounts of time. It's actually Australians. I've no problem with Australians. My godmother's, lives in Australia and is Australian. But yes, you imagine from all that's in the media, it wouldn't be Australians, but it is.
Yeah.
And I've nothing against Australians.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I forgot what the question.
Yeah, sorry, that was me, because we were talking about all the sentences change things.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it has made a difference in quelling the recent violence. But I think, as Richard said, we have to wait and see what happens. I mean, will these people serve a lot of time? They may be let go early. I don't know, because of the overcrowding in prisons. But I think we have yet to see. But it was good that they got long sentences, I think, to show the seriousness of what they did.
Actually, one thing on the sentences, yes, there have been one or two highlighted long sentences. Someone got 9 years for setting fire to that hotel. And it's something that the far right have been putting around, and Farage particularly. Another myth, I think, there's two-tier policing in this country, that they're hard done by, they're getting worse sentences than others, and it's just simply not true. I think people, especially I think Muslims and Islamophobia that exists, I think they'll be called out as terrorists and get really long sentences, whereas the far right have been naughty boys, thugs, and they've been sentenced for a year or two. But I'm sure if it was someone they've identified as a Muslim and as a terrorist, or they will get inordinately longer sentences. And also, we were talking earlier about Extinction Rebellion. I think a lot of climate change activists who haven't caused any violence at all, but they caused disruption, they've had very long sentences. There are a number of people in prison for 4 or 5 years who've been responsible for no violence at all.
Yeah, I think what the far right did during these riots was terrorism. It was. And so they should get equivalent sentences to other terrorists. But as Richard said, only a few of them got really long ones. But when you set a hotel on fire with people inside of it, is that not terrorism?
Yeah, no, exactly. And, as this scene, it's a very bleak look forward with all of this, but what is kind of next for Nottingham Stand Up to Racism? I know you've both mentioned some counter protests that you have going on, but what is the main next focus, you'd say, for the organization?
Well, we've got a meeting in 10 days' time, and I think one thing we want to look at is the positive things. I can remember in the 1970s, I've talked about Rock Against Racism. What made a big difference was there were a lot of good things going on musically that people could tie into, and the music was anti the far right, and a lot of young people got involved in that, and culturally it was the side to be on. There was an organisation called the National Front, who were the major far right organisation then, and they used to graffiti around NF, and people then used to change it to NF equals no fun, because there was Rock Against Racism and a whole lot of cultural things. And today, we have a lot of poetry going on and really positive things. In Nottingham, there's going to be Rock Against Racism concerts. Another organisation, they're all the same type of bands, called Love Music, Hate Racism. And I think these are the things young kids see as the place where there is good entertainment, good things going on that can turn the tide, I hope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, he's definitely right. I think we'll continue with our usual work as demonstrations, getting out in the community, kind of trying to educate people, and the protests, as we mentioned, on the 26th. But we also have been talking a lot about how we get groups around the county of Nottinghamshire, not just Nottingham Stand Up to Racism, but maybe Mansfield Stand Up to Racism or Ashfield Stand Up to Racism. So we were trying to find people who live in other communities in the county to start their own group. And then we can all work together, obviously. And we also, as we were saying to you before, want more young activists to start getting involved. So young people like yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to carry on the fight when we go.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, just kind of to bring the interview to an end, is there anything else that either of you would like to add or say, or anything that you'd like to share on the behalf of Nottingham Stand Up to Racism?
I'd just like to echo what Cheryl said. I think in Nottingham itself, I think it's always being quite an attractive city centre for people to come to. I mean, we're both white. We perhaps don't notice some things that do go on. But generally, it's asylum seekers have appreciated being in Nottingham rather than other towns they come to. And I think we've now got to push out from the centre of Nottingham to other areas in the county. Earlier on in the year, we had an event in Newark because they're looking to house asylum seekers near there, which has now been stopped, I'm pleased to say, for the right reasons, because they've been very isolated. But we need to push out into areas where aren't quite so multiracial and get the message across. You know, the enemy is the rich, the government. They make the decisions. It isn't the asylum seekers who have no money and migrants actually who do come across and want to add to our society and, responsible greatly for the health service we have. Without them, things would be even worse.
Yeah. I think for me, the final thing to say is that our Stand Up to Racism group is very diverse. Maybe you can't tell that here today, but we're the only two that could make it today. But we have a very diverse group. But I think it's really important to say that all of us need to be in this fight. White, black, whatever, brown, you need to be in the fight. So we welcome everybody to come join the group. We don't care where you're from, what you're doing. As long as you're anti-racist, come work with us. We need you. We need allies to help.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time today, both of you. Yeah. Anything? So that was the final words you'd like to have?
I think that's.
I think your words were a good ending.
Good ending, yeah. Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.